Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Heidi Roth. I'm a registered dietitian, and I'm so glad that you could join us here today in my kitchen for our topic today, which is some treats for every occasion. It's getting close to the holidays now, and so I thought I would share with you some of my favorite treats to kind of make to either give out as gifts to friends and neighbors and to serve at gatherings. So I'm going to be making three different things today. We're going to be making some spiced nuts. We'll be making a warm melted brie, and then lastly, some chocolate bark. So let's go ahead and get started. One thing I forgot to mention is I am going to wait until the end for questions. But in the meantime, please put your questions in the chat box. I do have my computer in front of me, so if you see me looking down, I do kind of monitor that here and there. So feel free to put your questions in. If I don't get to them while I'm talking, I will get to them at the end. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right. We're going to start first with spiced nuts. This is a recipe from the Smitten Kitchen. It's one of my favorite food blogs. I did adjust it a little bit. Sorry, Deb. I cut down the sugar in the spiced nuts. So if you want these more to be more desserty, then you can increase the sugar. But I'm a dietitian. I'm sorry. This is what we do, right? We cut back on sugar a little bit. And I still think that it is really plenty sweet. So for this recipe, we're going to be using 1/4 cup of brown sugar that I've packed in. Typically, when a recipe calls for brown sugar, assume that it's meant to be packed down. Unless you read otherwise, that's always the assumption. I have a 1/4 cup here of granulated sugar that I'm also going to be mixing in. And this is our spice mixture. So this is kind of the fun part here. You can really vary whatever spices that you like. I'm going to use a little bit, tiny bit of, kick it up a notch a little bit with some cayenne pepper and chipotle. But the main spice I'm going to use is cinnamon. So I'm going to use 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And add that in here. And cinnamon, as we know, not only does it provide some delicious flavor to recipes, but it also has some health benefits, including helping to stabilize blood sugar levels. It sometimes is used as a food preservative, so it also works for that. So a lot of different things with cinnamon, excellent spice. Any and all spices are going to have health benefits. That's kind of one of the beauty of things of spices, is that they all work in different ways. And they are a really, really concentrated source of antioxidants. Now you could add in some nutmeg, you could add in cloves, you could add in some ginger. So it's really, you could make your own spice mixture for these for whatever you wanted to add. I'm going to add cinnamon as kind of my main spice. I'm going to add a little bit of smokiness with some chipotle pepper. So I'm going to add in maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon of the chipotle and 1/8 teaspoon of cayenne. If you don't like any spice whatsoever, you can keep these out. But this is going to be for 3 cups of nuts. So it is a fair, it's not going to be all that spicy. Now, let's see. The last thing that you're going to add in is going to be some salt. So what does salt do for sweet recipes? Why do we add salt into sweet things, desserts? Well, one of the things that salt does is it actually does 2 things. It enhances the flavor of food. So you're going to want that even for desserts. It's going to make the flavors kind of, not to be hokey, but it's going to make them sing a little bit. The other thing that salt does is it makes things taste sweeter. So it's a really fun experiment to do. Bake a dessert without salt and add in salt to a different dessert, and you'll see that the dessert with salt actually tastes a little bit sweeter. So, and we know, of course, salt and sugar together are kind of a nice combination. So for this, I'm going to add in 3/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. If you want them to be a little saltier, you can add a little bit less. If you want it less salty, cut back a little bit. So that's it for our spice mixture. And as I mentioned, you can play around, have some fun with that. Oh, I know this isn't in the original recipe, but I also like to add some cracked pepper in there. I think some cracked pepper is really, really delicious. And pepper is called the king of spices. Anyone know why pepper is called the king of spices? If you do, put it in the chat box. I'm kind of quiz you here today while I mix this up. So I'm just going to mix up my spices and then get these ready to go and get my nuts into the oven. These are going to bake at 325 for about 20 minutes. All right. So not seeing anything in the chat box about pepper, so I'll give you the answer. The reason why pepper is called the king of spices is for actually two reasons. Number one, it's used pretty much in all cooking. Okay, there we go. I see we have somebody answered it correctly. It is the most used of all spices. And the other reason why, in addition to kind of going with everything and being really well used, is that it actually helps to increase the bioavailability of other spices. So for example, turmeric, if you've ever taken a supplement, you'll notice sometimes they add in black pepper to the supplement. And that's just so that you better absorb the curcumin from the turmeric. Okay, so now I'm gonna, I have an egg here, and what the egg does is we're just gonna use the white. So I'm gonna separate out the yolk from the white. What that does is it helps to bind and going to help the spices and the sugar adhere to the nuts. If you have someone in your, if you yourself or someone that you know has an egg allergy or is vegan, you can also use a little bit of just plain corn syrup instead. So what I would do is add the corn syrup to the sugar mixture. And, you know, we're probably looking for about 2 tablespoons or so of corn syrup. You might need to play around with the amount a little bit. Okay, so I just separated out my egg yolk. And if you're not familiar with this, you basically just take your egg and take the yolk and kind of rock it back and forth from one to the other. The extra yolk save, you can add it into your scrambled eggs. You can give it to your dog or your cat. So don't throw that out. So I'm just going to put my egg yolk aside. And don't forget, if you're ever whipping egg whites, if you're making egg whites that call for them to be whipped for recipe, that if you get a little bit of fat into the white, a little bit of the yolk, it's not going to whip very well. So just kind of a tip for, you know, if you happen to get a little bit of the yolk in, you might want to start over. However, with this, if you get a little bit of yolk into this egg white, don't worry about it. It's fine. We're not going to be whipping it all that much. All we're going to be doing is beating it a little bit till it's a little frothy. Right? You can see it's a little frothy now. And that's really as good as we need it. Okay. So here's your second quiz question. We're going to use some walnuts and we're going to use some pecans. Which one of these has omega-3 fatty acids in them? Is it the pecans or the walnuts? I'm going to use a little bit of both. You can use all of one nut if you want. You can use a mixture of different types of nuts. These are 2 of my favorite nuts. And I see in the chat box, you all have said walnuts. You are correct. Walnuts are the only nut that really contains any appreciable amounts of omega-3s. And if you look at the walnut half, what does that, let's see if you can see that, but what does a walnut half look like? It looks like a brain. So it's kind of nature's way of telling you, eat this nut. It has some omega-3s. It's really good for your brain health. And that's why it looks like a little brain. Now, every nut has some beneficial types of fats, but walnuts are the only ones with those polyunsaturated omega-3 fatty acids. I'm going to add in 3 cups of nuts, and you want these to be raw. You don't want them to be roasted because we're going to be cooking them. So make sure that they're raw. So I'm going to do 1 cup of pecans, and then because walnuts have so many benefits, I'm going to do 2 cups of walnuts. But you can do whatever you like. Just make sure that you have 3 cups of shelled nuts that are raw. And they're easy enough to find at this time of year. One thing about nuts is, remember, if you're not going through them quickly, you want to keep them in the fridge. Nuts, because they have a lot of polyunsaturated fatty acids, it's a type of fatty acid that tends to oxidize very quickly. So your nuts will go rancid if you're keeping them in the cupboard for a long time. So just be careful. Same with seeds. If you're not using your nuts and seeds very much, it's always a good thing to put them in the pantry. Okay. All right. Well, we got to get this in the oven here. We have a lot of things to make today. So I mixed in the walnuts first with my egg yolk mixture, and then I mixed in the spices. And so I've got my spices and all that nicely mixed up. Next, I'm going to take my sheet pan, and this is a sheet pan with some parchment paper on it. These nuts will stick to a regular pan, so parchment really is the best for this. It works a lot better than tin foil. So it's a good kind of investment to make. I use my parchment paper all the time for, cooking fish, cooking roasted vegetables. It's really kind of a great thing to have in the kitchen. Another great thing is some Silpat. And Silpat is those silicone sheets that you can put silicone sheets that you can put on a pan, and then they're washable and a little bit more sustainable. So what you can see here is I'm kind of socially distancing my nuts a little bit from each other so that they all kind of are not clumped all together, and that they cook, at the same time. And then we're going to pop them in the oven. Once again, 325 for about 20 minutes. Okay. Next thing that we're going to be making is our baked brie. But before I start with the baked brie, I want to get my chocolate started because we're also going to be doing some chocolate bark. So what I have here is a double boiler. My little nice stove here. And I've got water in the pot and a bowl over it. I'm going to pour in my dark chocolate, and I'll show you how I cut this in a minute. But I just want to get this started. So the recipe calls for a pound of chocolate. So I've got about 3/4 pound of dark chocolate here. I'm going to pour it into my bowl that's going to be over my water. And we'll get that going to start melting. Okay, so pivoting back to our baked brie. Has anyone made baked brie before? I think it's pretty delicious. So we want an 8-ounce wheel of baked brie, brie. This looks a lot bigger than 8 ounces. And if you said that, you would be correct. It's actually a pound. I have a very small grocery store that I go to. It's half a mile away, and it is very small, and they don't always have, the multitude of selections. So they only had a pound of baked brie. So, so apparently my husband and I are going to be enjoying a lot of baked brie this afternoon because that's all they had. That's okay. Okay, so baked brie, you want 8-ounce round of brie. We're going to put it in the oven. You want it to be cold. So you don't want to start this already room temperature because you run the risk of that it's going to kind of melt all over the place. It's so easy. And when you pull it out, it's warm and gooey. And this is the type of thing that you want to serve right away because it only stays warm and gooey for about, 15 to 20 minutes or so. So, throw this in the oven. This should go in at 350, but the nuts are in there, so I'm going to do it at 325 with the nuts. Okay. We're making a lot of things in a half an hour. So back to our chocolate bark. I have it on my double boiler, and I'm just going to kind of come along and stir this up. If you've ever worked with chocolate before, what you know is that you don't want to burn it. That's why I'm not melting this right on a pot, because I would run the risk of burning it if I just put it straight onto it. So we have a little water bath, and the steam is actually what's heating the bowl and very gently melting the chocolate. You can also do this in the microwave, but I figured for a food demo like this, it would be easier to do just in a bowl like this. Now, one of the things that you want when you're melting chocolate, so you want to temper it a little bit. Is anyone familiar with tempering? So a chocolate bar, let me just unwrap one real quick. A chocolate bar, when you open a chocolate bar up, it doesn't, you can see it's a little bit shiny. It's not melting when it touches my hand. And I don't know if you heard that. It has a nice little snap to it. That's what we want from our chocolate bark. And to do that, we have to do something called tempering. And tempering typically is somewhat of an involved process. About you heat the chocolate up, you cool it down, you heat it up again to an exact degree. But there's a way that you can do that a little bit more easily. And that is, you can melt 3/4 of it. And then the last quarter of it, you melt 3/4 of it first, then you pull it off the heat and add the rest in. And you want to cut the chocolate very finely so that it melts very easily. So basically you're taking your knife and you're kind of making like little shards of chocolate like this. And almost like you're shaving it in a way, and getting very small pieces. I'm probably not going to do this whole thing. But what this does is it prevents the wrong type of crystal from forming. I did a deep dive into chocolate this morning. And apparently when you melt chocolate and it solidifies, there are 6 types of crystals that are formed. And we are looking for something called a beta crystal. And that beta crystal is the type of crystal that keeps the chocolate looking shiny, that it will have a nice snap to it, and that it's not going to melt in your fingers. So that we want to kind of get it back to this original form of the dark chocolate. So to do that, we're going to melt 3/4 of the chocolate. You can either do it on your water bath, or you can do it in the microwave. Now, if you do it in the microwave, really important, you do not want to microwave it at full power. It needs to be at 50%. Usually what I do is sometimes when you do 2 things at once, it's hard. I do it on defrost. Another thing that you can do too is, one of the temperatures that you want this to get to is about 88 degrees. If you really want to get sciencey about this, you can get your instant thermometer out. You can put it in the chocolate, and I am at, oh boy, I'm at 115 degrees. So I'm kind of over where I should be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this cool for a little bit before I add in the rest of my chocolate, my chopped chocolate. So we'll just give that another minute or two. It may not be perfect. So that's the easier way to temper chocolate. Melt it in the microwave or on over your water bath. Don't let it get too hot. And then add very small pieces of shaved chocolate, about 3/4 of the rest of the chocolate in. And that hopefully should do the trick. Then what you can do is we're going to take it and we're going to take our melted chocolate and we're going to pour it onto our pan. And I probably could have used a bigger sheet pan in this in retrospect. We want the chocolate, we were going to spread out the chocolate to be about 1/4 inch thick or so. And then we're going to sprinkle it with different toppings. I'm going to put some pistachios on as a topping. I'm also going to add some goji berries. Anyone familiar with goji berries? So these are a type of dried berry. They are used a lot in Chinese cooking. They're called the longevity berry. And they are really a kind of a unique berry. They have a lot of beta carotene in them. They're a little chewy. I love them, and they have a lot of antioxidants and a lot of health benefits to them. So I really think that they're yummy. So I'm going to do kind of a holiday theme with the green and the red. You could certainly add many different things. You could add some sliced almonds. Some candied ginger would be nice too. So all of these things would be good. So I'm gonna, even though my chocolate is a little hotter than it should be, it's not gonna be perfect, but I'm gonna take it now and add the rest of my chopped chocolate to it and melt it. Don't forget, if you have any questions, put it in the chat box. Okay. So just gonna kind of stir that in, and that residual heat of the rest of the chocolate will help to melt it. And the fact that I had chopped those pieces fairly finely, so they're going to melt fairly easily. Yeah. So there we go. You can see how quickly that all those pieces kind of melted. Oh, maybe I have 1 or 2 stragglers here. But so if you're doing this at home, just don't forget, don't let the chocolate get too hot. I let it get a little hotter than it really should have. All right, this is the type of chocolate I used. It's just the Trader Joe's. I used a mixture of the dark chocolate and the super dark chocolate. So those are the 2 that I used. Gonna put this on my pan. Spread it out. There we go. Okay. And so we want this to be about 1/4 inch thick or so. We want it to be, thin enough that we can break it into bark, but thick enough that our things will stick to it. Okay. So put on my pistachios. And my goji berries. And then we're going to let this cool. Don't put this in the fridge to cool because you might get a little condensation on it. So we're just gonna let it cool at room temperature and it will harden up at room temperature. If you want, you can very ever so gently press in some of your toppings. But what you don't want to do is get the chocolate on top, because you want to see all those pretty toppings. So here we go. Here's our chocolate bark, right? Looks very festive and pretty. And then what you can do is you can break that up into pieces and eat it yourself, or you can also give it to other people as a gift. Let me go grab my baked brie and my nuts. So I'm going to actually, while those are in there, I'm just going to show you the recipes real quick. So we've got 3 recipes to share. Here's recipe number 1. If you all want to take a screenshot of that, I'm gonna actually turn down the light, maybe. So here's recipe number 1. So go ahead and take a screenshot. That's for the sweet and spicy nuts. Here is for the baked brie. And lastly, this is for the chocolate bark. I will show these again at the end, but I'm going to go get the baked brie out. All right, so I can feel the baked brie is nice and melty. And what you want to do now is very carefully transfer it onto the plate that you're going to be serving it on. I'm going to kind of got these things all. So you're going to want to take the parchment paper off. You kind of scooch it there like that. Right, we don't want this melty brie going all over the place. Actually, the easiest is actually to do it like this. So that you're not burning yourself and getting that melted cheese all over the place. So there we go. And then you take you can put some grapes around it, and some crackers and baguettes and things like that. A couple apple slices around it as well. And there we go. There. And make it look pretty. And then we're going to take some chopped pecans. You could do chopped almonds, kind of sprinkle them on top. And you really could do anything. You could do a little bit of raspberry jam. You could do some fig jam, spread it on top. You could do a little bit of honey. So take some honey. I just got this honey today because my last honey crystallized. And I did put it in some warm water and it did kind of uncrystallize a little bit, but not as much as I wanted it to. So we're just going to take a tiny bit of honey and drizzle that over. You can see like that. And you can do, more or less depending on how much you want. And then if you have a little bit of thyme or some rosemary, oh, here's my thyme. This is really pretty on there as well. You can take a little bit of thyme and kind of a couple of little pieces of that. You can either kind of scrape off some of you can put the whole twig on, or, depending on what you want it to look like, or just take your hand, take off some of the leaves and put them on that way. And oh my gosh, that thyme smells so good. Here, and kind of just make it look pretty. So it's kind of warm and melty, and you want it to stay together, but if I were to put a knife into this now, oops, there we go, now you can see it, right? If I'm gonna put a knife into that, it's gonna kind of be all warm and melty and delicious. So easy, right? You just take the wheel, put it in the oven, and then I've made it before, like in the puff pastry, and it's just a lot of work. And I think this is just as delicious, if not better. So serve this right away. It's not going to stay warm for forever. So there we go. There's, oh my gosh, that thyme smells so good. I can really smell that. And then lastly, I'll go show you our baked nuts. And then we're out of time. Okay, so here's my baked nuts. What I'm going to want to do is to kind of break them up a little bit. And so basically you're just going to take your spatula or your wooden spoon or whatever and stir them a little bit. And these look like they're nicely toasted. And as they cool, the sugar that kind of seems like it's kind of melty will cool a little bit. I probably might put these in for maybe another couple minutes. They still seem a little bit sticky to me. But you don't want them to burn. So these could be good the way they are. And, you know, as I mentioned, that they will get less sticky as they cool. So just be careful, don't overcook them. That's the main thing. And I actually might leave them the way they are. I think they're pretty good. Okay, so here is our nuts. And are we on time? Okay, well, looks like we're out of time. Does anyone have any questions? Do you need me to show you the recipes again? I see somebody put the takeaways in the meeting. Lovely. Thank you for doing that. I see that's the AI assistant. Interesting. I haven't seen that before. Very cool. Okay. Questions, comments? Do you need to have the recipes to be shown again? Thank you so much. I'm glad you liked the tips. And if you need the recipes, let me know, but otherwise we'll go ahead and say goodbye. Going to use up my pecans and walnuts. Excellent. Good. Yeah, it's a great way to use up some nuts. And these one more tip. I save my jam jars. This is like the perfect jam jar to use for this. Wash them out, put them in the dishwasher, take the label off, and then you can use it for salad dressings, but you can also use it as gifts. If you take the label off, you could put these spice nuts in the jar with like a little pretty ribbon around it, and that would make a really nice present for neighbors, for friends, coworkers, etc. So, okay, so I think we'll go ahead and say goodbye.